Good old mud on the post frame site. No, it isn't. It's kind of a sandy, not that it doesn't help having some good muck boots because you don't even care about the mud.
Mud? What mud? How?
So we're getting going here on base trim, and we do this before we run our house wrap. It's something that we didn't used to do, but I think it is a little bit of a better process because we'll run our wrap over top so that if there is any moisture or anything, it has a place to get out over top of the trim. Regardless, I just wanted to share that, you know, we have spent a lot of time making sure everything was perfect, but even so, we still like to set the 350 laser back up again, and we use the receiver to make sure that all of our trims are set to an exact grade dimension, and that is 4 inches. You've got the bottom of the grade board, which is what we call grade, and your finished floor on the inside is 4 inches up. So this bottom of the trim basically represents top of your concrete on the inside. People always ask, you know, what happens with this space here? Well, that's why we give you 4 inches. This is a ground contact treated board. You can put your grade or your finished grade up against that and still stay off of your trim a little bit. So a lot of times I recommend guys to use a nice gravel, something that'll dry out quickly. You know, it's not the perfect scenario. Obviously a nice foundation wall would be ideal because then you can put your backfill or whatever up against that concrete and you know you're never gonna have to do any maintenance. Even though this is a lifetime treated board, at some point you'll probably have to pull the wainscot off, pop out this grade board, and replace it. Super easy to do. You'd probably be able to do that in a day. For the cost of the foundation wall, if it lasts your lifetime, maybe that is where the cost savings is, because if you were to do like a 4-foot footing wall, you're looking at probably 40 to 50 bucks a linear foot, and you definitely can recoup that cost by changing out your wainscot and your bottom grade board a couple times. What I'm working on right now is our window framing, cutting down some 2x6 material. I like to use the Festool track saw because it guarantees like an efficient, perfect 90-degree perfect cut every time. It just makes it super efficient. So I know it's a pretty expensive tool, but for what it does, you just can't beat it when it comes to precision. I know a lot of you out there might say that you can get just as good of a cut with a standard framing circular saw. That's true, you can. You can use your speed square, or maybe you're just an anomaly. But this not only makes sure you're straight, but when you're cutting on the edge of a board with a regular saw, you can, as you finish the cut, you can kind of roll. And this just takes all the guesswork out of having to try to be perfect, because it will do it for you. I just need a new blade on this thing. It's pretty much toast. The other kind of nice feature about this track saw is you don't have to square any of your lines. You're just gonna put your mark where you wanna cut. You can line up the edge of this track right on your mark, and you're gonna get the perfect cut every time. All right, so I'm gonna start framing windows here, and what we always try to do is make sure that the top of our window frame is the same as the top of our door frame. That way there's a nice consistent look around the entire building. You know, maybe that's not right, but that's just how we like to do it. What I'm gonna do, and I probably should know this by now because I've done it a million times, is I know that the top of our doors are at 82.5 inches, and I know that we shot laser marks, or we used our story pole to transfer measurements to all of these columns. So what I can do is I can use this dimension here, which is 39 plus 32, 71. I have to account for my 4 inches up from grade. So even though my door top is at 82.5 from finished grade, I've got a 4-inch grade board below finished grade. So I'm gonna add 4 to my 82, which is 86.5. I've got my 71-inch, this should be 71, and I suppose I should just double check it real quickly to make sure. Yes. So 71, that means I'm gonna go underneath this, where this line is, I'm gonna measure up 15.5 inches, and that should put the header of all my windows the same as the header for my walk door. I just think it's a good look. And what I like to do is set a nail or a screw on one side. Then I'm gonna go ahead and take my header board, which is really not a header. I mean, we call it a header because it's at the top, but it's not really doing any structural work at all. Then what I like to do is take my 8-foot stabila and I will make sure that it's level, because, you know, even if it's a 16th off, if I were to measure up this side and measure up this side, a 16th is a 16th. So you might as well just take a couple seconds and do this as perfect as possible. With a stabila 8-foot level, doesn't get much better unless I were to bust out the laser. You know, it's funny, yesterday here in Northern Illinois, it was 50, I think I seen 57 degrees, and today we got snow on the ground and more snow coming. What do you know? Gotta love it. Before we go any further, what I recommend you always do is, and what we always try to do is, make sure that our walls are plumb before we do any amount of leveling of the windows side to side. So that header, that's not gonna change much, even if I have to move the wall, you know, a 1/4 inch or so, that's not gonna change. But I don't wanna frame the window in unless the walls are level. I would say I could bring this wall, and I don't have my plate level out, so it's a little bit trickier. See, that looks money. You know, there could be a little bit of something going on in the column. That looks good. I'll double check the other side real quick. Everything should be pretty money. Yes, it is. So now that we have that upper header, as we call it, in, I'm gonna go ahead and frame my lower. And this is pretty easy. We're not gonna level it. We're just gonna mark 36 inches down from both sides. Now, as far as layout goes, this wall is a little bit unique because we don't have a rib on the end of our building. It's a 40-foot wide building, which means when we start in the center, we're gonna work our way out to the ends. That means we're gonna have a rib. Our last sheet of steel will be 2 foot. So if I go 2 foot plus 3 foot, that's gonna put a rib right at 5 foot. And that's kind of close to where my window's gonna go. I've already talked to my client. They want this window as far to this column as possible. So with a 4-foot wide window, I'm gonna wanna be centered up with a rib on my steel. I'm gonna use this mark that I had just made where a rib location is. I'm gonna set it at 9 inches, and then I'm gonna go every 9 inches after that. So 18, 27, 36. So now that I have my 9-inch spacings, I'm gonna go ahead and take and just put 2 foot next to, well, that kind of tells it right there. Can't go exactly on this guy because it's just not gonna work framing wise. I'm gonna have to probably put this window in the center of a flat. I'll go ahead and mark the center of this window. Come on, get out of my way. Okay, now that gets the window framed in and plumb where I like it. And now I got to do a little bit of blocking. And this is more or less just so I've got something solid around the window for my trims and to mount the window itself. Now what we do is we just run a 2x4 from the top of this header to the bottom of this header here and screw that off to both the headers, the girt that's running through the window, and I'll screw the window frame to it, and just kind of trying to keep it all locked in together. Now remember, there's no weight on this window. The steel itself is going to be supporting a lot of it, but being on a wall that has all the bearing weight on the columns, I don't have to worry about weight on window headers, which is a really nice perk of a post frame. You can put your windows anywhere you want. Pretty cool. Oops. So now that we have these backer boards framed in, I got to cut this back 3.5 inches so that my face frame can fit in here. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll just take my square, mark 3.5, That way I've only got one tool out. I'm not having to pull my tape measure out, mark it, then pull the square out. Just save yourself a little bit of time. Just gotta make sure I set the depth so I don't cut too deep. Perfect, like a glove. Look at that. So there you go. That is a window frame in a post frame. Super simple, but very functional. It's going to do the job. And when we do our interior, that's going to lock it in even more. This is very important to take your time and do this right, because when you go ahead and do your interior trims, if you don't make sure that everything is perfect, it just makes that job a lot harder. Because we're the guys that do that interior trim, you betcha we're going to take a little bit extra time to make sure everything is good, plumb, square, and the right dimension. So whenever you house wrap on a post frame, which I recommend, you should always house wrap a post frame, because post frames are inherently a monster sieve for air. Air goes through all those panels. They're not weather sealed tight. The most unfortunate thing is that we don't have sheathing on our exterior, so we can't just run a 10-foot roll of house wrap, but it's handy to have them because there's a lot of times where 10 foot is exactly what we want. So I get all 10-foot rolls. These are the custom block it. You've probably seen us use them. One thing I recommend is get yourself a good blade on the Sawzall and don't try to rip through it as fast as possible, because what happens is it's going to burn the material, and then when you go to unroll it, it's a nightmare. So just take it kind of nice and easy. Let the tool do most of the work. Just kind of rock it back and forth nice. Keep it at a nice slow RPM. That was awesome, wasn't it? That was pretty good, wasn't it? I didn't know that was going to happen. It just happened. Always have like 4 people to do this job too. And yeah, you could probably do this on a chop saw, take it nice and easy. Anytime I've used a circular cutting tool like that you can't control the RPM on, it burns up. So I want this to kind of unravel freely. And this looks like it did a pretty good job. We don't have any burning, nothing hard. It looks all soft still, so
nothing melted together.
We should be good. Of course, when we're gonna run house wrap, the wind picks up, but it is what it is here on the post frame site. So let's go. I'm gonna get that started there. Then I'm gonna run this bottom back, keeping it not too tight. And I'm just gonna kind of do that for a little bit. Now what I'll do is we'll just kind of set this here and we'll stretch it straight up the middle. The wind's in our favor today, I think, for now, for once. Hop up there and stretch it straight up. Straight up. Okay, take it to your right. There you go. But that's all I really need to get started. Now I can just stretch out and hit those 3, and then you can come behind and hit the top. What I found, Zach, is make sure you hit the middle of an area. I'll tell you, running house wrap on a post frame is not that easy, especially when the wind is out and you're trying to really push and pull that roll to keep it nice and taut. And yeah, it doesn't probably matter too much when you put that steel on the exterior. It's going to flatten it all out and nobody's going to see it. But I just think it's not only looks better, but it's more efficient. You use less material if you keep it nice and taut, and you can get more out of a roll. Yeah, I'm going to have to probably get this thing stretched up here. Hey, Zach, can you get a second? You come over here in the middle of this area and get one up high for me. Yeah, right on that post there probably. No, just lean it right into that girt. Lean into that second girt. I think that'll be the best bet for you. That's not horrible. Nice, good work. Now, if you're wondering why we're using staples versus cap nails, because I get that question, if you use a cap nail and then you put steel over top of it, you will see that cap nail. It will, like the image will bleed through and there'll be little wavy spots on your steel. So do not use cap nails. It's easier, they hold better than a staple, but it does not look good. Whew, it's not looking too bad, Zach, for the breeze we got. Oh, I knew that was gonna happen. Yeah, right when I was gonna go. Never fails. Never fails out of staples. So now the good thing is we'll be able to come right behind the house wrap install. And since our base trim's on, we'll be able to start installing our wainscot. The wainscot's gonna really hold down the house wrap. Yes, we worry a little bit about this up here, but since we have all of that open up there, there's a place for that air to escape, so it doesn't get a whole lot of pressure on that house wrap. Not with these kind of winds. I mean, I think they're calling 20-mile-an-hour max today. All right, now when laying out the wall, you want to consider a couple things. First off, this is a 64-foot building, so that means that 3 foot is not divisible. Also, that means 9 inches is not divisible. And you might be asking yourself, what does that really mean? I did a video about layout and how we kind of distinguish where we're gonna start, stop, and put all of our metal for windows, doors, corner trims, and really everything. So go check that out if you're interested. I think it's over here, and if I remember to tag it, I will. Otherwise, just go look in the tips and tricks playlist. I do believe layout is there. Anyway, we want our rib to be on the corner of the front of our building, and that's because our porch that we're gonna build on the other side, it just needed to be that way to make everything work properly. Normally on a 64-foot wide building, we're gonna shift our ribs 1.5 inches from the corner so that we have a rib 1.5 inches on both corners. And if you do the math, 64 is 21 full sheets of steel, and then we've got 1 foot left over. So in a 1 foot of a panel, we've got a 9-inch rib, and then we've got 3 inches left over. We don't really like ending with a 3-inch rib, so we don't like to be 3 inches off of a corner. So in this instance, normally we want to shift this one over 1.5 inches. That way, on the end, we're shifted over 1.5 inches. Everything is nice and equal, but because of the porch, and I might be way over your head, and you might be saying, Kyle, that makes no sense, but just know that because we're going to start with 3 inches down on that end, we can ensure that everything works out well and we get a rib right on the center of this corner. And that's going to line up also with our ribs up on our roof. So everything is going to line up real nice. So we're going to start layout back on this end, and that's also going to make sure that our laps are facing opposite where people are going to normally be. So where you are right now watching us, when we run from this end towards you, our laps will be hidden. You won't see those shadow lines of that rib where the steel overlaps the other side. So since we're going to start 3 inches ahead, normally I would be 37 inches for a perfect rib on the corner. So we're going to start at 40 inches. Once I get my 40-inch mark, I like to go ahead and set a nail so that I can go ahead and hook my tape measure right over the head of that nail. It holds a lot better than on the end of the building, and I can give it a little bit more of a nice secure tug. And I'm just gonna go ahead and mark every 3 foot. It's kind of nice because we're back here a little bit protected from the wind because it's getting pretty windy out. So we should be, let's see, yeah, perfect. That's perfect. So we should be 8 inches from the end, which is right where we're at. And you might be saying, but your ribs are 9 inches. Kyle, you wanted a rib right in the center of this guy. Remember that 8-inch mark here is the edge of our sheet. So when you go back 1 inch to the center of the rib, that's 9 inches. We should be perfect. What Greg is doing is making a nice plumb line top to bottom so we can line up the edge of that wainscot. You don't have to do this, but it definitely makes life a lot easier, wouldn't you say, Greg?
A lot easier.
Yeah. I mean, that'd take you, what, a couple minutes while we're getting all this other stuff prepped, so. Yeah. What is this garbage?
I don't know.
Pick that up. I did. Clean job site is a safe job site, Greg. All right, so you can see here the punches. We got those set up. We got 1.25 inches from both ends, and we just used a pretty standard punch to do that, and you're just going to go ahead and put a nice couple hits on it. You're not going to go ahead and try to swing for the fences, because you will have to redo this. You can probably get about, depends, 10 to 15, depending on the stack. Wainscot is always tough here on the framing. You would think it would punch through easier, but when it's suspended between supports, it seems to punch a lot better. So remember those marks that we made on the wall? Now they're gonna definitely come into play. So we've got our top mark, and Greg leveled down, or plumbed down, I guess. What would you say there? I mean, it's a plumb line, but you leveled it down.
Leveled it down.
Yeah, I think leveled it down. We're gonna go with leveled it down. Let me know in the comments below, guys, if that sounds ridiculous. But all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that my leading edge is right on that mark. I'm gonna do that on the top and the bottom. You're never going to install the steel where it lies. You're gonna put it where you want it. And we kind of messed that up. When I say we messed it up, we don't really want to punch hole right here, because when we put our corner trim on, it's gonna be right there, and that's gonna cause us some problems. So we're gonna go ahead and shift this sheet over one. We'll bring a fresh sheet in without a punch hole later. So let's go ahead. Good thing, it's a good learning lesson here. 3 inches, by the way, is kind of our max. We can't get our outside corner trim around anything more than 3 inches unless we do some custom trim work. So here, we'll show you on the next one what I mean by kind of not installing the steel where it lies versus moving it to your marks. I think in a perfect world, these would just go on and be perfect. But you can see I got a good lap, and I'm just an 1/8 inch or so away. I'm gonna stretch that sheet so that I'm right where I want, top and bottom. Top looks pretty good. I like that. And then what I'm gonna do is come back here to where my lap is, and I'm gonna make sure that right here on this crease is set in nice and tight. And that's how I know I've got a nice lap. And I think you'll see it better there on the top when I come to that top. You see that? Now, I don't know if you can see this, but this is our siphon, and there's just a little bit of a break between the two pieces of steel. There's this gap right here. That is the anti-siphon. So when water tries to wick its way into this panel, it's gonna hit that gap, and it's gonna work its way out the bottom. And wainscoting is pretty darn easy, so it's not a whole lot to know other than make sure you do your marks, your layout, make sure things are right, make sure you got a nice level base trim, and it's pretty repetitious, man. Just start installing it. All right, let's go to town on this. Man, today did not turn out like we hoped it would. Got pretty windy, started spitting sleet and snow. We were able to get this back wall house wrapped, wainscot, double angle trim here on the top, which is looking mighty straight. So that is always that's always a nice thing there when that works out. Oh, look at this, we left some tools out. But what's nice is hopefully after tonight, this will all firm up. Right now it's pretty squashy and muddy. Hopefully this all firms up, and tomorrow we're able to get back here, run the rest of this house wrap. A good old custom block. It looks good, especially with those colors. Look at that. Look at that. That looks nice. Maybe we'll work our way right around this corner, and the goal is to kind of just keep coming around this way. We've got those windows. You can see we framed in these windows here, these 3 windows. These 2 here are out. So the porch ends back here. This is just some framing, extra framing for trims and whatnot. But then these 2 windows will have upper windows above them. You can see we've got our cedar showed up. That's all of our cedar columns and header for our porch. Love that stuff. Wish they would have wrapped it though. Like I said, not exactly what we wanted. Yesterday it was 57 degrees. Today, 30 degrees, snow, ice, sleet, a lot of wind. We're gonna go home. We don't have much daylight anyway left. And when we get here tomorrow, hopefully we can get a good jump on the house wrap before any wind comes up. I think it's supposed to be 20 to 30 mile an hour as well tomorrow, but I think it all depends on the direction of the wind as to what we'll be able to do. I think we'll be all right. So we'll catch you guys tomorrow.